Now, I don't care if you're the Pope of Rome, President of the United States, Man of the Year. Something can all go wrong.
I've been taking these Huggies and whatever cash you got.
There's more to life than a little money, you know.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know?
The uncertainty principle. It proves we can't ever really know what's going on.
I'll show you the life of the mind! I'll show you the life of the mind! I'll show you the life of the mind! I will show you the life of the mind!
Oh, geez.
Welcome to The Life of the Mind, the podcast about the Coen Brothers. I'm your co-host, Chris Ayers.
I'm Barbara VanDenburgh.
And I'm Jason Keil.
So we're finally doing it. A little history of this podcast. It's been almost exactly a year since I had the idea. I literally had the dream. I was listening to a Coen Brothers podcast. And when I woke up, I searched for one and I couldn't find it. So about 24 hours later, I posted on Facebook about my idea for a Coen Brothers podcast, hoping that someone would discourage me. And Jason immediately chimed in with, "Let's do it."
And your life hasn't been the same since.
Thanks, Jason.
So taking that year gave me the time to rewatch all the Coen Brothers films chronologically and to do some research. We all had some life stuff going on during that time that made it hard to get started. And also during that year, we invited our good friend, Barbara VanDenburgh, to be our co-host. And we're very happy about that.
Thank you for inviting me to be the third wheel. Always happy to be the third wheel.
I'm honored that you're here, that you joined us.
Yeah, we have a real blue Twitter checkmark with us. Barbara is the only one of us who's verified, so that gives us a little bit of legitimacy.
God help you if that's legitimacy. We're in trouble.
So we'll eventually be covering all the Coen Brothers films in chronological order, but this first episode is just to let people know who we are and what our history with the Coen Brothers is. So Barbara, do you want to go first? Just tell us who you are, what do you do, and tell us a little bit about your love for the Coen Brothers.
Well, I'm Barbara. I read too many books and watch too many movies and talk about both of them too much. And for capitalism, I am the books editor for USA Today. I was a longtime film critic at the Arizona Republic. Yeah, I just care about pop culture and books and movies entirely too much, and have somehow found some suckers to give me health insurance to do it for a living. It's pretty great.
That is awesome.
and I gotta say that the Coen Brothers, for me, you know, when you asked me at first if I was interested in a Coen Brothers podcast, I jumped out of my seat because they were sort of like gateway filmmakers for me. And I feel like they were gateway filmmakers for a lot of people of our generation, like young Gen X, early millennials, or elder millennials. Early millennial. I wish I was an early millennial, an elder millennial. That they're kind of gateway filmmakers. They're intellectual, they're artistic, they're complex, and yet they're still so accessible and entertaining that when you're 14 or 15 years old and you don't know anything about anything, you can still enjoy a Coen Brothers movie and then watch it when you're in your 30s and your 40s and finally maybe sort of begin to a little bit understand it. So for me, they were just two of the filmmakers that introduced film to me as an art form.
All right, Jason.
So for capitalism, I'm a copywriter, but for fun, I was the culture editor for the Phoenix New Times until you know what happened. I currently write for Phoenix Magazine for their music notes column and their weekly concert blog, and I also do their events pages. I've written for a few national publications since COVID hit, both around in the fields of parenting and pop culture. But I've, to kind of touch on what Barbara said, like I've grown up watching cable, working in movie theaters, and the Coen Brothers serve, and like the Coen Brothers have sort of been this a gateway. They introduced me to what Capra-esque is before I even knew like what it meant. And among many other things, as someone who also in their teens was obsessed with Twin Peaks and David Lynch. I also got to see that you could be artistic and also be funny. Because I've never seen a funny David Lynch film, like intentionally funny one. So that's what the Coen Brothers have meant to me. And I still watch their movies over and over again and discover something new every time I watch something. Even when I watched Raising Arizona for the 500th time and doing these movies, like you still notice things now that I live in Arizona.
Yeah, you're raising Arizona kids.
Yes, exactly. It's got a couple Nathan Juniors in the other room.
And what kind of jammies are they wearing?
We got Yo's and shit on 'em.
That's what I was getting at. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, actually, I think they do have Yodas and shit on them. They're obsessed with Baby Yoda or Grogu. Spoiler.
Yeah. All right. As for me, I've worked in media most of my life, the TV news business, as well as some entertainment, a national TV show called Right This Minute. I'm a creative person, an art director, designer, animator, video editor. I've also edited and produced podcasts in the past. And also just a huge cinephile. And I have been since I was about 16 and got my first job at a movie theater and saw Pulp Fiction on the big screen for the first time. Which showed me that movies could be different from the mass audience entertainment that I was used to. And Fargo was a huge gateway film for me. Like you said, Barbara, I didn't know what film noir was when I first saw Fargo, and it introduced me to that kind of quirkiness and weirdness and darkness, which is why Fargo is still one of my favorite films. But when I was thinking about this podcast, there aren't a whole lot of other filmmakers that you could do an entire series on that are that prolific, that have been around for like a long time, but continue to put stuff out. The ones that come to mind are maybe Steven Spielberg, Soderbergh, Woody Allen, who's made about 50 films. Not that I ever want to cover Woody Allen for reasons.
Martin Scorsese probably, but I mean they're like juggernauts who've been around for so long since like the Coen Brothers are the ones that do little things that are weird, right? Like those other directors, like God loves Steven Spielberg. I love Steven Spielberg. I love Martin Scorsese. They're masters with carte blanche who make big and bold movies. They make popcorn spectacle entertainment, at least as far as Spielberg goes. And like the Coen Brothers still get small and strange and surprising in ways that, I love Martin's. I mean, I'm not suggesting that Martin Scorsese has lost a step. I still think he's making masterpieces, but they're still experimenting in ways that I think other directors stop experimenting.
True. And they're the only ones who can sort of get those small, weird, mid-budget comedies made anymore. It's almost impossible to do that unless you've already done it, 30 times.
Yeah, like who's making A Serious Man's? Who's making Inside Llewyn Davis's? Like it's a unique space that they occupy, this attractive looking, not micro budget adult dramas. Like it's a type of movie that doesn't really get made anymore.
It's true. And when they're gone, I'm not sure who will take up that mantle and who will make those kind of films.
Who else but Joel Coen would make a Macbeth movie like 5 years after Fassbender made a Macbeth movie?
Right. And not just a Macbeth movie, but like a black and white sort of like German expressionism style Macbeth with an older cast with like two older leads, which, flips the script on its head. Yeah, like even something like Macbeth, which you don't think of as being experimental or agile, right? This is something that has been around for centuries. There's been dozens and dozens of cinematic iterations of Macbeth. Like it feels old, and somehow Joel was able to make it feel fresh. Like,
and
not a lot.
As I was rewatching the Coen Brothers films, I realized that I had been taking them for granted my whole life, because they'd always been there since I was become a cinephile. They're always putting out a new film, even if it doesn't break the world apart. It's not the most amazing thing. It's always something to look forward to. And I just came to the realization that I think they are my favorite American filmmakers. I didn't even really have one in my mind. I have my other favorite filmmakers are European or Chinese. But I think the Coen Brothers have my favorite view of not only life, but life in the United States. And the absurdly dark view of it that I subscribe to personally.
Yeah, I feel the same way, actually. I have what I like about him is that there's this sort of like cosmic fatalism to everything they do, and yet they're not nihilistic filmmakers. Like, people call the Coen brothers nihilistic filmmakers a lot, and I don't think they're nihilistic at all. I think they have a moral code. I think their characters exist within universes that have moral codes. But there's just this cosmic fatalism to their movies that is so pitch black, and that they can wring humor out of that just really, really speaks to as a pessimist with a dark view of the world and other people in it.
Yeah,
it really speaks
I feel
to
it
me.
100%. I would eventually we'll probably get into the finer points of nihilism versus absurdism versus all the philosophies, right? But I agree, it's not nihilism. Absurdism is a cousin to nihilism, but it's not 100% nihilism.
Nihilist man. But I agree with both of you. That there is like some hope in their dark world. Like I think of like the first Coen Brothers movie I've ever seen, which is Hudsucker Proxy. Like, even like right before he goes splat on the sidewalk, Norval Barnes finds that second chance, but he has to like make the leap and see his life flash before his eyes before it happens. And I just, that's what I like about it.
So what was your introduction? So if Jason's introduction to the Coen brothers was the Hudsucker Proxy, what was your introduction to the Coen brothers?
Mine was Fargo, which was 96, I think. I was probably 16 or 17 years old. Then I immediately wanted to go back and rewatch everything they'd ever done, but I started with Blood Simple and couldn't really get into it. So I kind of stalled out for a bit. But later I got way more into them. But Fargo was amazing, and how do you follow that up?
I would argue that they've at least matched it with other films. Like, I do think Fargo, if you were going to pick one movie to show somebody that sums up the Coen brothers and their oeuvre, I would pick Fargo. But I think that they've made movies that are maybe as good since then.
No, I agree with that. I'm just saying my personal favorite, the one that I repeatedly rewatch, is Fargo, for sure.
Yeah. I grew up. I'm in Arizona, and I was born in Arizona. Lived here my entire life, so Raising Arizona was a constant staple in my household. That was a VHS tape that we wore out to death in my house, and so I watched that a lot as a kid, and it sort of hardwired some cinematic comedic sensibilities in me, I think. I don't think I saw another Coen Brothers movie until I was like, I think maybe 14, and I was at a sleepover, and I couldn't sleep because I'm an insomniac, and my friends were asleep, and my friend's older brother worked in a video rental store, and he had brought home the Hudsucker Proxy on VHS. And I picked it up, and I thought, what a weird title. I don't know what either of these words mean. And I put it in the VHS player and was like, whatever this is, I love it. I don't understand it, but I love it.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to investigate with this podcast is, what does a Coen Brothers fandom look like? Other people have had that same experience that you had with the Hudsucker Proxy, or it triggered something in them. Like, what is a Coen Brothers fan, and is it different than a Lebowski fan? Because I would argue that it's a different breed.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear on what kind of fans we're talking about here.
And I don't want to discount anyone's opinion, because that's just like your opinion, man. But I can quote Lebowski, but I don't love it, honestly. And I'd like to find out, and I'd like to hear from our listeners. Are they the fan of the broad range of films, or are they more Lebowski? Because I can guarantee the episode that's going to get the most listens is going to be Lebowski. I pretty much guarantee it.
And you're gonna get hate mail because you just said you didn't love it. So that's gonna be a problem right there.
It's fine. It's fine.
They're gonna get a lot of emails that say, "That's just your opinion, man."
I'll go ahead and stake my claim as the villain of this podcast already on the Lebowski issue. And maybe I'll have a character arc where I come to love it, because I think I've seen it 4 times now, and I like it more every time I see it. I'm just not putting it near the top of my list.
I will say that I struggle a little bit. It's funny because I just talked about Raising Arizona being sort of my comedic foundation, but I've struggled with their other comedies, and I don't think I've liked any of their like straight comedies on the first watch. And like The Big Lebowski was a movie I did not care for the first time I saw it. I did not like it at first. And it took a couple watches for something to click in place in my head for me to be able to appreciate it. For me to like let go of expectations of plot and character growth and just sort of enjoy the ride. But I've had that problem with all of their post Raising Arizona comedies. Like Burn After Reading was a movie I didn't care for that grew on me over time.
I don't think I appreciated Big Lebowski until I smoked a J and watched it in college, and that's when like it all clicked for me. Because I remember just watching it and like going, "This is what they followed up Fargo with? What?" And then in college, we watched it. My crewmates are huge fans of the movie, and there are also a few huge fans of weed, and they suggested that I enjoy on weed, man, and that's when it all clicked. But I agree with Barbara too. Like The Lady Killers is, I mean, it's not even funny, but I think Intolerable Cruelty is probably the one that I got first go. Probably because it was meant to be like this studio comedy. It was meant to be broad.
Right. It's pretty straightforward. It's just they did a script polish on it. I don't think they generated that project. And when the last time I saw Lebowski, I was on edibles. So I went to a theater here in Vancouver when the movie theater started to open back up. That was Big Lebowski was one of the films they chose to open it. The other one was Cinema Paradiso. Ended up going to both of them. But yeah, so I even suggest when we get to the Lebowski episode, maybe we do it stoned. It's legal now where we all live, so.
I have smoked pot exactly once in my life.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I was in my 30s. Like, this is how square and unfun I am. But I would do it for this.
All right. Well, you can get it really easily. You don't have to smoke it. I prefer gummies myself.
All right.
So we'll see how that goes. I'll probably just forget to press record on that episode. That's just probably how that will go.
Oh, just being Barbara, laughing hysterically.
I did it once, and I what did I watch? I watched Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and I don't think that was the right pairing. It was like pairing the wrong wine to your meal, you know? It was like I drank red wine with fish or something. It didn't gel, and then I just felt kind of stupid. So it was not a good experience. But I can see how The Big Lebowski would pair nicely with an edible. So I'm willing to go on that journey with you guys.
All right. So we've already kind of alluded to this, but I'm going to ask you guys what your top 3 favorite Coen Brothers films are, if you can even choose.
I think my favorite still is Fargo. It's just the perfect movie for me, the way they balance violence with humor, with Midwest sensibility. And it's something I didn't really appreciate until like I lived in Wisconsin for a number of years. The Minnesota Nice and how Frances McDormand portrays that so well. When it comes to like how fatalistic and Coen Brothers characters can be too, it's where I turn to Inside Llewyn Davis. That's my second pick because I like the soundtrack so much more than I like Oh Brother Where Art Thou for one. And Adam Driver's in it, of course, and he's sort of like my man crush still at the moment. And I love the cat and just how it just goes in this cycle over and over again. It's just a perfect movie. And third one, which I think is no secret, like to anyone who's listened for the last 10 minutes, but Raising Arizona, I can just watch that over and over again and discover something new or see how another filmmaker stole like from that movie quite literally. In fact, I don't know if anyone's been watching Barry for the last 2 seasons, but Bill Hader steals heavily from Raising Arizona when he directs an episode. As does Edgar Wright with some of his comedies.
Yeah, there's a manic energy, cartoony energy to those films.
I don't think you can't not include Fargo. I mean, it's like their quintessential masterpiece, so I have to say there's a short list of perfect movies in the world. I think that goes on the list, and it's the perfect distillation of their craft. And I think that Marge Gunderson is the best character they've ever created. I think she's one of the best film characters ever created.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I love Fargo. Two, and I feel kind of like a tool for picking the best picture winner, but No Country for Old Men really, really does it for me. It tells you a little bit about me and the problems that I have, that No Country for Old Men is one of my comfort movies. When I'm feeling kind of sad, I reach for No Country for Old Men and it makes me feel better. I think that there's not a wasted second in that movie. I think that it is relentless and has the most devastating, ambiguous ending of any of their films. And they got a career best performance out of Tommy Lee Jones. And I really adore No Country for Old Men. I feel kind of like a tool because like I'm picking the one that won Best Picture and not like Barton Fink, but here we are.
I can't wait to have an argument with somebody who doesn't like the ending of No Country for Old Men because I think it's brilliant. And I've argued with a lot of people in my life about that movie, and they seem to like it up until the ending.
I love an ambiguous ending like No Country for Old Men, and I saw it in a movie theater that hated the ending. And my experience in life has been the more a movie theater rebels against the ending of a movie, the more I'm going to love it. I had this exact same experience with First Reformed.
You know what? Did you see No Country for Old Men at the Harkins Camel View in Scottsdale?
Yep.
I did too, and I had the exact same experience. People were literally calling their friends on the way out saying, don't go see that movie.
Yep. And for me, usually it's the Harkins at Camel View, all the old retirees with nothing better to do than see every single movie that came out. Usually it would be them. So like they rebelled at the end of First Reformed. My theater, nearly the worst experience I ever had was for Tree of Life. Like I felt like it was a sold out crowd. I thought they were going to riot. But it was that kind of energy at the end of No Country for Old Men where they just could not handle an ambiguous ending. And I was like, yes, into my veins, directly into my veins, more of this.
Yeah. I remember going to that like at 4:00 on like a Saturday or something. It was sold out. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, this is a big crowd.
We may have been in the same theater and didn't even know it.
Yeah, it's likely.
I'm sure we were in the same theater for a lot of movies and didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And then my number 3, and I'm not sure I can articulate why, and I'm kind of excited for this podcast so that I can learn how to articulate why, is A Serious Man.
It's a good pick.
I think it's got, again, one of those delicious, ambiguous endings full of doom and portent. Yeah, that movie just, I don't fully understand it, but it haunts me and it sticks with me in a way that few other movies do. So yeah, Serious Man.
All right, I love that one too. I'm looking forward to talk about that one. My list is very similar to yours, Barbara. At number 1, I have Fargo, no surprise. Number 2, No Country for Old Men. And number 3 is Jason's number 3, I think, was Raising Arizona. Which we should note that we have all lived in Arizona. And I lived in Phoenix, Arizona for about 14 years until I moved to Canada because I had some arrest warrants in the States. No, I fled the country. I'm just going to put it bluntly for other reasons.
Take me with you.
But yeah, Raising Arizona, I had not seen that movie until I got to Arizona. So I didn't see it until like I was about 30. And I was like, well, let's see what Arizona's like. And I'm looking forward to talking about that film because that is not really what Arizona's like, at least to me. And I think we're going to have another Arizonan as a guest on that podcast probably. And so we'll have a pretty well covered what it's like to live in Arizona. But I'm not a big fan of comedies, and Raising Arizona is one of my favorite comedies. And I think the first 10 minutes of that short introduction section at the beginning is like perfect in and of itself.
It's one of my favorite comedies, and also the ending makes me cry. So apparently I like comedies that make me cry as well.
I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think is the most underrated in the Coen Brothers filmography?
I'll go. one of Jason's picks, Inside Llewyn Davis, which is one of my favorites. Hurts me not to put it in the top 3. I think that one's underappreciated. When people talk about Coen Brothers movies with great soundtracks, they tend to go straight to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou and not Inside Llewyn Davis. I think that movie is phenomenal. I also don't think True Grit gets enough love. I really liked it when I saw it in the theater, and then finally read the book by Charles Portis, True Grit, and grew to have an even deeper appreciation of the Coen Brothers adaptation because it so perfectly captures the tone of this first-person narrator and the little girl. And it's a singular narrative voice that they have captured while still being themselves, while still being very much the Coen Brothers. Yeah, I don't think there are that many great modern Westerns, at least in the last 20 years, and that's the best of them.
What do you think, Jason? Underrated?
Underrated for me is actually one of Barbara's top 3, which is A Serious Man. That movie, it's one of those comedies again, I didn't gel for me the first time I watched it. And then the more and more I forced myself to watch it, the more and more it clicks for me. And just the visuals, the getting beat against the chalkboard, the tornado at the end, all of it just really comes together for me. And I just think it's hilarious and to me in a way that I can't necessarily put into words. So I'm really anxious to discuss that. And I think if you want to talk about a movie that's influenced people, I think A Serious Man is a direct descendant of, directly gave birth to Uncut Gems.
Wow. Okay.
I like that. I just watched Uncut Gems. I'm ready for that argument. I like it.
Both engender a lot of anxiety.
I think the Safdie's lifted. I think, yeah, it's about Jewish anxiety. But, one's in the 50s and one is in 2013 and has The Weeknd. And I'm ready to have that discussion. All
right. So for my underrated, I'm picking one that's more recent that a lot of people were disappointed with. For me, it's Hail Caesar. I just love the time period. I love how funny that movie is. I love the whole Hollywood blacklist thing and the fear of communism and the House Un-American Activities Committee and just the time that it takes place in. The character that Josh Brolin is playing in that, Eddie Mannix, was a real guy who is. I would say there's a great episode of You Must Remember This, Karina Longworth's podcast, about how horrible that guy was. I thought it was hilarious. I don't know why other people were so disappointed in it. Maybe they were expecting something more in depth or more profound, but it was a kind of a silly, light comedy. I don't know. I've only seen it twice, but I really love that film. I think I'm in the minority on that.
I think you would be in the minority if you had said The Lady Killers.
There's somebody out there who is the number one fan of The Lady Killers in the world. We will try to find them.
God help them.
I would like to meet that person.
God help.
And have a long talk.
If you're
with
listening
them.
to this and you know that person, please help them get in touch with us. We'd like to talk to them and ask them why.
I'm curious to rewatch that. I mean, I haven't seen it since. I have not seen The Lady Killers since it came out. I remember the acute sense of disappointment and whatever accent Tom Hanks was doing, and that's pretty much it. So I am curious to revisit that horror and see if it's still as acute a horror as I recall, or if time and distance will have softened my heart a little bit.
I think that film gets better as it goes along.
Okay.
I'm not saying that it gets better rewatching. I'm saying it starts bad and gets better.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get over
Gotcha.
the bad early on.
But if it loses you at the very beginning, it's
Right.
hard to recover from that.
So I've already said my most overrated, which is The Big Lebowski, and I will stand by that. But what do you guys think? Your personal most overrated in the canon?
I've already sort of talked shit about it, but I think for me it's Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Okay.
And I don't dislike it. It's a fine movie. I just think that the soundtrack is doing a lot of heavy lifting for that one.
Which is fine. It's like sort of a musical, and I really love the music.
Yeah,
in it, so
no.
I put it in like probably on my top 5.
I think the music is great. It just, again, I'll be interested to watch it and revisit it and talk about it more in depth. But when I look at the entirety of the Coen Brothers oeuvre, I don't think that that's like, music aside, one of the more interesting films that they've made.
When I revisited, when I was revisiting the movies for this, that was the one I was looking forward to watching the least, which is surprising since we just like shit the bed with lady killers. It's I agree too. Like it's, and when I watched it again, like there are some like it's the soundtrack and the pomade that really do the heavy lifting on this one. But also George Clooney's charisma also in that movie just takes it a long way. His whatever accent he's pulling there is really spot on compared to Tom Hanks doing his Colonel Sanders bit in The Lady
That's
Killers.
peak George Clooney, handsome and charismatic. I don't think he gets any better than that for me personally.
Yeah.
Maybe if I had a crush on George Clooney, that movie would rate higher for me. He just doesn't do it for me. He's no Oscar Isaac and Inside Llewyn Davis. I need that energy.
I also love Oscar Isaac, so I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna
I
make
too love
groaning
Oscar
noises
Isaac.
for the rest of this podcast. I'm sorry.
No, to be clear how deep my Oscar Isaac love goes, I've it's the only reason why I've managed to get as far as Moon Knight as I have. I've got one more episode to go, and like and there's something about his goofy accent and that show that is just it's an oddity, much like again like Hanks's accent in Lady Killers, and apparently his one Elvis is pretty awful.
I think if you take Oscar Isaac out of Moon Knight and replace it with somebody else, that show becomes almost unwatchable. So I did watch all of it for him.
Unless it's Adam Driver. I'd watch Adam Driver in Moon Knight. I suppose I'm next on the overrated question. But I agree with you, Chris. I think Big Lebowski is probably the most overrated one in my book.
All right, so I'm not alone.
No, you're not alone. I thought long and hard about it, and like when we gave us the questions, and that's the one if we were to remove it, everything I'd still feel as strongly as about the Coen Brothers now. It doesn't change the average for me. For as much whatever fandom is on it, I don't quite understand it, but I'm glad that's there because it brings attention to the rest of the Coen Brothers movies.
My question for you would be, do you think, and I know we'll get into depth in this when we actually talk about The Big Lebowski, but for both of you, you think it's overrated? Is the frustration with The Big Lebowski itself, or with the fandom that is just like outsized to whatever it is that's on screen?
I think for me, it's the fandom. I don't quite understand how it's grown to have its own religion and its own parties. I don't understand why it's on the level of Rocky Horror to me. I'm glad, and I guess I'm glad in a way because it does again brings attention to the other movies. It gets Jeff Bridges. It keeps getting Jeff Bridges' work. So I'm quite happy it's around. But I've never gone to a screening where I drink White Russians or go to a bowling alley or something. It just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, I agree. My issues with the fandom as well, which is not to say that it's an obnoxious fandom like some toxic Star Wars fans or anything. It's a good-natured fandom, right? It's
yeah.
I can quote the lines. I've seen a million memes. I appreciate it. But when I first became aware that it had reached the level it had, I think it was maybe 2009 or 2010, and I was surprised that people loved it that much because I just didn't think that much of it. I'd seen it twice at that point, just trying to make sense of it. I get it now, and I appreciate it. I'm not gonna say it's bad. I like it more every time I see it. I'm just sort of like playing being annoyed at the fandom. I just think, it is what it is. It's a cult movie. It's the biggest cult movie that they put out.
I wasn't anticipating being the Big Lebowski apologist because it's not my favorite, but I think I'm going to end up being the Big Lebowski apologist.
Well, I've liked it every time, a little more every time I've seen it. So maybe like the 5th time will put me over. We'll see. All right. So what film are you guys most excited to talk about?
I'll take this one. I'm really excited to talk about Miller's Crossing, mainly because I remember in college when I was in film school, I had gotten into this deep dive with the Coens, and I read this article about like what the hats mean in that movie and what it represents, like how if you're not wearing a hat, you're a liar. And it's just like 30 years ago. I'd have to find. I'm really interested in like locating the article again. Like between Miller's Crossing and Barn Fink, those two early 90s movies, I'm really excited to discuss those because they're just the most they're the ones we probably overlook not the most now, nearly 30 years after the fact. And there's like a lot of deep meaning in those movies, especially Miller's Crossing. I really want to get back into that one again. Plus, it's always nice to see Sam Raimi do a cameo and something, because he makes that little cameo in Miller's Crossing where he shoots the building when he's before everyone else or something.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to talk about the connection with Sam Raimi and the influence of their early films and their collaborations with him and working with him and Bruce Campbell cameos, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's early career. The first few films are definitely attached to Raimi or influenced by. Barbara, what did you think? What are you most excited about?
Well, now that I know we're all going to take edibles first, I'm excited for the Big Lebowski. Probably the one I was least excited about until I found out we were going to do drugs first.
Legal drugs.
Legal.
You know, I take back my answer. I'm more. Let's just skip. Let's make that our first episode.
I'm gonna have to build up to that. I'm such a square, man. I'm gonna have to steel myself for that. All right, but otherwise, like, I am really genuinely, authentically excited to unpack A Serious Man with people because I feel like not a lot of people got it. I had like fraught conversations with friends who were like, why do you like this movie so much? And I don't feel like I got to experience A Serious Man with serious cinema goers. And so I know that I love that movie. I know that it has had like a huge impact on me and that I think about it all the time, and that on some days I think maybe it's my favorite Coen Brothers movie, and I can't articulate why. And I'm really excited to like finally be able to articulate why I love that one so much.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one too. But my number one most excited to talk about is one I don't think gets that much love, but it's Barton Fink.
I love Barton Fink. It hurts me not to put that in my top 3. It's there's a William Faulkner character in it for
yes there is. Barton Fink, the more I watch it, the more I relate to it on a lot of levels, and it's come up a lot in my estimation as I rewatched it. So yeah, it almost cracked the top 3 for me. It's probably 4 or 5 if I have to really buckle down and decide.
It's hovering right outside the top 3 for me. I would say that that's the Coen Brothers movie that made me serious about loving the Coen Brothers. When I, was a teenager and working my way through the back catalog, it was when I hit Barton Fink that I was like, oh, these are all-timers for me.
Yeah, and it's also that old Hollywood that I was just talking about with Hail Caesar. I just love that time period and their take on it. And it should be noted that the title of our podcast comes from Barton Fink. The Life of the Mind, which I'm sure you heard in the intro and our theme song. So we were talking about what the fandom looks like earlier, and something that sort of points to that is box office receipts. So I wanted to see if you guys, for fun, could name the top-grossing Coen Brothers movie at the box office. This is international box office, and number 1 is by quite a large margin.
I think it's True Grit.
Gosh, well, I mean, if we were just talking about the soundtrack, it would be "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," like with a bullet. I don't know. I'm gonna go with that.
Jason had it right. It's True Grit.
Is it really?
Yeah, 252 million. No, and Oh Brother was 71 million. So it's their films hardly ever crack 100 million.
That many people saw it's so weird to me because I said it was one of my most underrated films because like nobody talks about it. It doesn't like surface in conversations about the Coen brothers. I feel like the Western has lost so much cultural cachet that it doesn't surface in cultural conversations. I'm really surprised to hear that.
It doesn't make a lot of sense until you remember when it came out, because I saw this as our Christmas Day movie with my family. It was a Christmas movie, and it is the movie you take the family to.
My mind is still blown.
Yeah, that's exactly why I thought it was, is because I remember seeing it like around the holidays, and that's the movie you take your family to. Like, it's a movie that everyone can agree on. Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon.
I'll just real quick run down the top 10, and there's some surprises in here. No Country for Old Men is number 2 at 171 million, which made sense because it won an Oscar. Probably got a big bump from that. Burn After Reading is number 3 at 163 million, which that seems incomprehensible that a comedy can make that much money these days.
But it was the movie they made right after No Country, right? Wasn't that what they followed up No Country with?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they were riding the Oscar bump with that one.
Right, and did something completely different, as they typically do. They're not going to make the same movie twice. And then, let's see, number 4, Intolerable Cruelty at 120 million. That's just probably based on George Clooney. And here's a surprise. At number 5, The Lady Killers. It's 76 million.
God help us. God help us.
I don't know why. That was the year after Intolerable Cruelty. Maybe they still thought there was some magic in the Coen brothers at that point for comedy.
Well, and I mean, Tom Hanks, the box office charisma of Tom Hanks.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
After that, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? It's 72 million. Hail Caesar, it's 63 million. Fargo, 60 million. The Big Lebowski, 46 million. Inside Llewyn Davis, about 33 million. So that's the top 10. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I think we're all forgetting the box office appeal of Marlon Wayans in a non-scary movie role.
Maybe so.
Which he's legit funny. He's actually the best part of The Lady Killers for me, more than him and J.K. Simmons. It's so funny too because the two movies that we probably don't like. I like Intolerable Cruelty. I think you two don't. I assume, and I think we all are in agreement with The Lady Killers, but neither of those movies were like originated with Joel and Ethan. They're all like some other person's projects that they just happened to like. We got nothing to do.
Well, at least they got a paycheck from it, and at least they turned in some coin at the box office. So I guess it makes a little more sense. If that's what is able to fuel them to make German expressionism, Macbeth, and A Serious Man, then okay, sure.
Well, that's the reason I think answering that question, what is the fandom? What does it look like? Is interesting because that's a weird box office tally. They're capable of making a huge crowd-pleasing Western, and there's some really bad comedies that still make a lot of money.
Well, I mean, I think the film, sort of like the cinephile film community's fandom is going to look a lot different than, the average moviegoer's fandom, because everything that you just read down, like, I don't think at least half of those movies would crack like a cinephile who really is devoted to the Coen brothers is gonna crack a lot of their top fives,
Right, yeah, I agree with that.
So I mean, I think we're talking about two different. I mean, fandom is different than general audience.
So wrapping up here, just for fun, I wanted to go over some of the rejected podcast names that we came up with before we brought on Barbara. Jason and I came up with some truly bad ideas. And I will take credit for mine. I think I came up with the Coen Brothers. Also, this podcast really ties the films together. Or maybe that was Jason.
I think that was you because I think I was the one who told you that you can't name the podcast after the book.
Oh, I knew that. Yes, I knew the name, the Adam Naiman's book. Adam Naiman's amazing coffee table book. You should go buy it. Jason, you want to read some of the ones some of your really bad puns that you came up with?
Yeah, I think I'm the one who came up with Men of Constant Sorrow.
I like Men of Constant Sorrow. Even though I'm on record as saying that Oh Brother Where Art Thou is overrated. That's a good, I kind of like that one.
That was just a little too sad for a podcast title.
I'm a little too sad.
Yeah.
A lot of us are a little too sad.
I think another one was like The Podcast That Wasn't There, which we haven't brought up that movie yet. The Man Who Wasn't There. Talk about underrated. we didn't even talk about it. Just like really bad dad joke puns that I'm ashamed that I'm sharing with strangers.
Well, if you don't read them, I'm going to read them.
Well, I think the other ones are like Significant Brothers, Brothers of Invention. I think one other one I said like for kids. That one probably shouldn't be anyone's podcast title.
My favorite of your bad ones was What's Coen On?
Yeah, that one's a good one. I think of all my dad jokey titles, that was probably the best one. It's still not too late to change our minds,
Well, no, it is. I've already made the artwork.
It can be anything we want.
And the
okay.
theme song. What we really haven't talked about yet, which I think our listeners are going to want to know, is that the structure of this podcast, we're going to be talking about the films in chronological order, in seasons. So you can break it up pretty easily into 6 or 7 episodes per season: early period, mid period, late period. I think we're going to end the first season with Fargo, that kind of ends on a high note, and then pick it up with The Big Lebowski and how that follows up on Fargo and the disappointment that some of us felt on seeing Lebowski immediately after Fargo, but having that be their most popular film.
Yeah, I think my excitement of talking with adults about Coen Brothers movies is something I've been looking forward to as a parent who's not gotten that much in the last 2 years. I mean, before off mic, I recommended that you two watch a cartoon. So I mean, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys for joining us for the first episode, what will be the first of many. And we've got about, I think, 18 films to get through, maybe more if we do some specials. So for our next episode, our first real episode, we'll be talking about Blood Simple, their first film. So we hope you will listen to that. Until next time, I'm Chris Ayers.
I'm Barbara VanDenburgh.
And I'm Jason Keil.
The Life of the Mind is edited and produced by me, Chris Ayers. Music by Nick Shelby and Mike Brenner at CosmicAmericanMusic.com. You can follow us on social media on Twitter at Coen Brothers Pod and on Instagram and Facebook at The Life of the Mind Pod. You can also find my designs for Coen Brothers alternative movie posters at etsy.com/shop/Chris Ayers Creative.